Hey guys, welcome back to the King Kong Reviews. So for our finale, we're going to take a look at, from my perspective, one of the greatest projects never made. While Universal did eventually do its remake in 2005, there was one more attempt to remake Kong back in the 90s, and was actually quite different but had a far better story. How does it hold up? Well, let's find out by taking a look at the 1996 King Kong. The story begins in the skies over France during the First World War, as Captain Jack Driscoll, played by the rumored Bruce Campbell or George Clooney, and his best friend do some Top Gun-esque training in their biplanes, only to be ambushed by the Red Baron, which leaves Jack's best friend dead and the captain to survive on his own. We then go forward to 1933 Sumatra, as Jack now works at a mill during a British dig ran by Lord Linwood Darrow and his enthusiastic archaeological daughter Anne, played by the rumored Kate Winslet, who are attempting to excavate some ancient Hindu ruins. Suddenly, a crass film director, Carl Denham, played by the rumored Gary Oldman, or the more favorable Robert De Niro, enters the scene to film the dig and the Sumatran wildlife for his high-class documentary. Accidentally crashing into a buried ruins, the group find an ancient golden statue of a giant ape god, who Lord Darrow believes to be the legendary Kong. After finding 2 portions of a map to an uncharted island, the dig and its finds are silenced by the Hindu authorities, which causes Lord Darrow to be killed by a stressful heart attack. What follows is a fantastic chase scene, as Denham and his crew, along with Jack and Anne, haul off into the jungles towards the docked Venture, as the Hindu authorities follow after them, only to be killed in a river filled with man-eating crocodiles. Upon retreating to the Venture, they all decide to sail off towards the mysterious Skull Island to find the greatest discovery of all time. Arriving on a wall of fog on the island itself, the team discover a primitive tribe of savage natives living in a village under the protection of a massive wall. But the natives attempt to kill the explorers as Jack and Anne lead an escape. They return to the Venture, but Anne is kidnapped by the natives, dressed in sacrificial clothes, and is offered as a gift to the giant ape god himself, Kong. The 25-foot-tall silverback gorilla emerges from the jungle and steals Anne away. After a quick battle with the natives, Jack and a camera-hungry Denham lead a rescue party to save Anne. Seeing Kong as a vicious carnivore, Anne does everything she can to survive, and even entrances Kong with a soft lullaby to tame the anchored creature. Meanwhile, the rescue crew survives attacks from a large variety of dinosaurs, including a group of hadrosaurs, an armored ankylosaurus, a stampede of brontosaurs chased by a pack of carnotaurs, swimming away from a large swamp monster, and angering a mother triceratops after killing its youngling, only to come face to face with Kong upon a large log bridge. Kong shakes the log and the sailors are killed by large hybrid insects. However, Jack, Denham, and a sailor named Peak survive the ordeal as Denham retreats to the wall and Jack and Peak continue after Kong. Meanwhile, Kong battles a pack of Tyrannosauruses, but Anne is almost eaten as she gets trapped in one of the giant reptile's mouths, and Kong rips its jaw open to fish out Anne, who now has a high fever due to the bacteria in the Rex's mouth, leaving Kong to take her up to his lair to mend. Kong takes Anne to his lair and she heals fast, as they both have a playful moment together. But the two are suddenly attacked by a flock of bat-like pterosaurs. Kong fights them off as Jack saves Anne, but the cowardly Peak meets his end in the jaws of an Elasmosaurus. Kong follows Jack and Anne back to the wall as he rampages through the village, but Denham ends the beast's wrath by shooting Kong in the knees and the crew knock him out by beating him in. The scene shifts to New York as Denham shows Kong to many spectators in a wondrous stage show, but also torturing the poor beast like an elephant trained in a circus act. Anne tries to stop the show, but Denham holds her back aggressively. Angered, Kong breaks through his chains and stomps Denham into submission, only to rampage through the streets in search of Anne. Wanting to stop the destruction, Anne allows Kong to reclaim her as the beast climbs the Empire State Building for safety. But when a battalion of biplanes fly in to kill the king, Jack Driscoll enters the scene by flying another plane in order to protect Kong. But it's sadly no good, as Kong is shot down and falls to his death in the streets below. Full of chase scenes, dogfights, dinosaurs, and some fantastic action set pieces, the only thing I can ask is,
why the fuck didn't they make this movie?
Out of all the Kong projects that were panned in the ape's 85 years of existence, this one is definitely the most heartbreaking. Discovering this lost project on the extended edition of the 2005 final product, in my opinion, this would have been far better than what we ended up with. It has everything a Kong movie needs in this day and age, and the story would have been a great new take on the tale, rather than the shot-for-shot, line-for-line remake that we did get. So how did this project, which seemed to have some time and effort put in, end up getting the plug pulled? Well, let me tell you how it all went down. It all started from the mind of one of my all-time favorite directors, Peter Jackson. Back in 1970, Jackson was a young lad of 9 years old, who was already making movies on Super 8 film, but his real fascination to his career sparked while watching the original King Kong on TV, and thanks to that film, he became the successful filmmaker we know today. Hell, he even attempted to remake Kong at age 12 using his own built stop-motion puppet of Kong, clay dinosaurs, and some great miniature work at that age. But after doing some test footage of Kong on a cardboard model of the Empire State Building, he got so far and realized he had some over-ambition, and eventually canned it and moved on to other projects. Years later, in the 80s, he then went on to make a career of himself with some pretty impressive, if not completely bonkers movies, including The Independent Bad Taste, The Muppet on Acid-Filled Meet the Feebles, and one of the goriest movies of all time, Brain Dead. In the early 90s, he was nominated for his first Oscar for Best Original Screenplay for the film Heavenly Creatures, starring the newly talented Kate Winslet. He then got his first directorial job for a big studio with the film The Frighteners, which starred Michael J. Fox and was produced by Robert Zemeckis and Universal Pictures. As the studio was seeing dailies of the film, they were quite impressed with Jackson's work and wanted to make another film with him. Lenny Kornberg, who was the executive producer on The Frighteners, called Jackson one day and told him some interesting news.
There's a couple of horror movies that the studio is wanting to remake, and would either of them interest me? And one was The Creature from the Black Lagoon, which I sort of didn't get too excited about, and the other one was King Kong, which I did get very excited about. And I said to Lenny, because I'd never mentioned Kong to him at all, and I said, you realize this is my favorite film.
Having read the history of Universal's attempt at remaking Kong since 1975, Jackson decided to take the offer in directing the remake for the studio, for which he felt could have gave a marvelous take on the story, if not both respect and pay tribute to the original, since he was not the biggest fan of the 1976 film, for which at a young age, waiting in line at his local theater with great anticipation, sadly going in alone. While the studio wanted to use the original Bo Goldman 75 script, Jackson decided to start fresh by giving the film a classy Hollywood adventure tone, with some flashy smart humor, very similar to Steven Spielberg's Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like I said before, the story is absolutely fantastic and moves at a fast pace and is very entertaining. I do honestly feel that they should have stuck to the first draft in order to make the film a different take on the legacy of Kong. I even like the character changes. Jack Driscoll is a lot more developed as a character than any previous incarnations of the male protagonist. You can see the pain he's gone through and why he's a stubborn grump like he is in the 1933 film. Anne is also different in this one. Rather than being a down-on-her-luck actress, she's a hard-working yet beautiful independent woman who could hold her own in a rough spot. If you really think about it, she's much like Margot Robbie in the recent Legend of Tarzan movie. Then there's of course Carl Denham, who's changed to an overt villainous filmmaker. Now I know a lot of fans don't care much for the Denham character to be a villain in every incarnation, and I will agree on that since Robert Armstrong's original portrayal is a very heroic leader. But this version is very haunting, and you do want him to get his comeuppance. Hell, I'd say the character is much better than what Jack Black played. His Carl Denham was more of a manipulator, a coward, and it seems like Black was going for a Jack Nicholson impression at times. The Denham in the 96 script was more in the style of a Robert De Niro performance. This leads to my next bit. During pre-production in 1996, Jackson was already choosing his cast list. While the studio suggested Gary Oldman for the part of Carl Denham, Jackson did go with Robert De Niro, who he believed looked exactly like Robert Armstrong, and I gotta say, he kinda does. Sorry Gary, no hard feelings.
I haven't got time for this Mickey Mouse bullshit!
Jack Driscoll was also a studio director battle. A lot of fans at the time suggested Evil Dead star Bruce Campbell, since he had the look of Bruce Cabot from the original. Bruce. Robert. I'm seeing a pattern here. But Jackson wanted to go with then newcomer to stardom, George Clooney, who was more known for works like From Dusk Till Dawn, the TV series ER, and
7 million. Never leave the cave without it.
that.
And I really want to apologize.
While I think Campbell would have been the perfect choice for the hero, Clooney could have also pulled it off, both physically and as a love interest for the female lead. Which brings us to the beauty herself, Ann Darrow. While several actresses were considered for the part, including Mira Sorvino and even Cate Blanchett at one point, Jackson already knew who he wanted for the part. That, of course, was the lovely Kate Winslet, who worked with Jackson on Heavenly Creatures. Fun fact, if Kate worked on Kong at the time, she would have never been in, well, this. As casting was being settled, Jackson, along with producer Robert Zemeckis, the crew at Weta Workshop, and the newly created Weta Digital, began doing pre-production by creating concept art, sculptures, and CGI tests to prep for the production ahead. Hell, they even brought in legendary comic book artist Bernie Wrightson to do the concept art for some major sequences. I had actually talked with Bernie about the project, and he said this: "It was a really good time down there and on that project. Everyone enjoyed themselves, and I'm glad my work on the film fascinated some hardcore Kong fans, even if it never got off the grounds at the time." While the concept art really showcased what the film would have looked like, the work at Weta Workshop was also fantastic. Several sculptures of Kong and his fellow monsters were worked on, and the crew even began work on some of the animatronics that were to be used on the shoot, including some jaw-snapping crocodile heads and even a life-size mechanical Kong hand rig, which was to be used on green screen to composite with the CG Kong, and I gotta say, it would have made Carlo Rambaldi and other mechanical Kong builders really proud. Pre-production also went to location scouting. One area that fascinated Jackson was the Putengura Pinnacles. Jackson had used the location before on the film Brain Dead and wanted to use it this time for the Brontosaurus Stampede. But he wouldn't make it as iconic until using it as the Paths of the Dead in The Lord of the Rings. With the amount of time and effort put in, principal photography was set to start around 1997, with a release date for the summer of 1998. It seemed everything was going according to plan, until something interesting happened. By January 1997, some dark clouds began to appear over the horizon. At the same time Kong was going through pre-production, two other big-budget giant monster movies were being made. Disney was producing a pretty decent remake of Mighty Joe Young starring Charlize Theron and Bill Paxton, while TriStar and Roland Emmerich were shooting an American remake of Godzilla. And I know Godzilla fans, I'm with you, it's just Zilla. Both of which were also planned for a 1998 release. Fearing of being in third place for three giant monster movies, Universal started to feel the timing was not right for Kong. It was also a fact that the studio honestly did not have much faith in Jackson, since The Frighteners flopped at the box office and the guy was only known for his cheesy splatter flicks. The final nail in the coffin was in late January of 1997 when Universal pulled the plug on Jackson's remake. For the crew, and especially Jackson himself, they were devastated. For many of them, this was their first big-time film project, and had invested a lot of time into it. Hell, Jackson even had the crew sculpt a really cool statue to present as a thank you to the studio.
And then when they killed the movie, I called them up and said, "Send me my model back."
But as a side note, in 1999, BBC Films, CBS, and TNT joined forces to implement a new adaptation of Bo Goldman's script of The Legend of King Kong, with Lawrence Fishburne, Sam Neill, Raquel Weitz, and Ian McShane approached to play in the film with a big budget of £25 million. The special effects were to be made by the team at Lucasfilm's ILM, and filming would take place in New Zealand and London in the winter of 1999 and 2000 for a planned release in the US in July of 2000. But once again, the plug was pulled for some obscure reasons. While Peter Jackson was bummed that his Kong was canned, he still wanted to prove himself and those around him at his production facilities that they could make a spectacular film for people around the world. And after reading a book from his younger years, he had one story in mind he wanted to tell. This, of course, was the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Released in in a span of 3 years, from 2001 to 2003, The Lord of the Rings was an outstanding spectacle that became the basis for the fantasy genre we know today. With critical praise, box office astonishment, and winning a total of 17 Academy Awards, including Best Picture for Return of the King, it became a massive phenomenon and put Jackson and his New Zealand film team to the top spot for future film projects for major studios. This, of course, led to Universal gaining confidence in the epic director and immediately turned to him for a massive offer in remaking Kong, which of course he gladly accepted. His finished product, as I said in my review, is still a pretty damn good movie, but while it's great for visual action and some good character development, it still does not hold a candle to the Kong story planned 20 years ago, which in my opinion would have been far superior and could have been my favorite Kong film. I still to this day felt that while it was cancelled in '96, Jackson and the crew could have still made it in 2005 with the first draft. It had a far better story, pace, and tone, the characters were a lot more fun, and the action sequences would have been spectacular. And it seems the only possible version of that Kong that we did get in terms of tone was with the 1999 Universal film, The Mummy.
When I saw The Mummy, I was thought, did they read the King Kong script?
So if you want to see what the Peter Jackson film could have been in terms of story and tone, check the film out. It's a fun little adventure. But overall, I still have a major hindsight for the Kong that could have been, and I feel it would have made for far greater entertainment. A solid 10 out of 10. It's by far the superior of all the Lost Kong films. Well, that's all for now. Tune in next time when... Close one. Well guys, that's it for this year's run of the King Kong review series. I hope you enjoyed it and found it informative, and got to know a little bit of the history of the Kongs that never were. So, what can we expect from next year's run of reviews? What?
I expected a little more.
What are you talking about? Oh right, there's a new King Kong movie out right now.
Guess again.
You're absolutely right. Well guys, tune in this summer when I take a look at the recent new bits in the history of King Kong, for the adventures here on Skull Island are not yet over.